Now let's turn our attention to DNA. What would be the Y DNA haplogroup of these Proto-Semites? And what will the autosomal breakdown of these Proto-Semites be? If Proto-Semites descend from the Tufians, and if Proto-Semites are expanding from the Levant in the early Bronze Age, then it's highly likely that Proto-Semites would carry haplogroup E. According to Abdul Rahma Rahmed from the Facebook page Y-DNA E-M35, it reads, through its younger E-M123 mutation, haplogroup E-M35 apparently has a major role in the peopling and inhabiting process of Mesopotamia, with current concludes coming from the available scientific literature. A brief history of the former via its chronological context reveals an almost uninhabitable area in the south with a weak, insecure presence of hunter-gatherers in the north during the onset of Paleolithic until the Mesolithic, which makes the PPNA agriculturalists arriving later from the Levant as the ultimate first sedentary settlers in Mesopotamia, existing in its northern sphere after a series of pre-6th through 7th millenniums BCE migrations. Although later in history PPNA settlers have advanced to the PPNB culture in most of the attributed sites, Mesopotamia, on the contrary, had a more complex record, with other cultures assimilating PPNA in between, and thus largely shaping the demographic case of the region, until additional migrations from the heartland southern Levant were recorded when semi-nomadic pastoralist groups reached the western and northern edges of Euphrates Valley regions and extending as far as northern Syria, the kind of migrations that are going to be known later as Akkadians, while those stationed in the south will be simply the future Sumerians according to archaeologic theories. That was from G. Ackerman 2020 in To the Euphrates and Beyond Archaeological Studies. Although the alternate published genetic narrative had shedded much light on Near East's primitive migrations, there's still an up-to-date lack of direct Mesopotamian focused samples. However, this isn't the case of the former mentioned specimen of pre-Pottery Neolithic PPN cultures of the Levant. These that were found belonging in majority to E-M123 lineages after testing, Lazarus et al. 2016. The latest Levant's genomic studies did furthermore introduce two recent important results from the Chalcolithic to Bronze Age site of Ebla in Syria and Arstelet-Tepe, ancient city of Milid, known to the Akkadians as Milidu, between 3400 through 2400 BCE of each. These new samples of ART015 and ETM010 were found belonging to E-CTS9608 clade after the study's E-M123 assignment, and interestingly, this clade unites with most of the current day South Semitic speakers carrying E-M123 in Arabia at the E-PF6751 level. It's worth to note that the reason behind the dramatic adoption of nomadicism and late pastoral migrations of Levantine PPN groups was a climate overturn events, specifically affecting the Jordan Valley and southeast Levant with extreme aridity and droughtness, forcing agriculturalist dependent groups to rely more on domestic animals and acclimate desert hunting practices. And this is pretty confirmed by direct archaeological evidences at present. And that was from Jairus Zarin's 1990 Early Pastoral Nomadicism and the Settlement of Lower Mesopotamia. These growing groups, according to the author, haven't only migrated north and east to Syria and Mesopotamia, but also further south to Arabia, expanding the Semitic languages landscape in each. Hence the discovery of E-CTS9608 clade in North Levant/East Anatolia, and other E-PF 6751 clades in Arabia, would reflect the former's important rule among early Semitic speakers gene pool, and likely for Akkadians to be related in the E-CTS 5265 level, if the discovered E-CTS 9608 itself wasn't direct Akkadian. As regards to the primary genetic impact of PPNA agriculturalists, both studies of Narshimhan et al. 2019 and Lazarus et al. 2016 did find a Levantine admixture in their Chalcolithic Iranian sample less than 5000 BCE. The same study had further reported a specific E-M123 variant, which is E-Y31991, among the Bronze Age cemetery of Pakistan's Swat Valley, with direct ties with the Iranian plateau, rather than direct Mesopotamian or Levants. The latest mentioned studies conducted on the Levant also showed an E-Z849 variant of E-M123 from Bronze Age Hazor, which is carrying an admixed autosomal of both Iran/Caucasus and local Levant. Hence, there is a possibility of it being a result of a back migration from these regions within ancient PPNA origins. So here's a chart illustrating the migration of early Semites that would have carried haplogroup E starting from the Levant into Mesopotamia and Arabia. The expansion of E markers from the Levant into Mesopotamia matches the exact same time as the expansion of Semites. And of course this makes sense because Semites are expanding from the Levant into Mesopotamia. And according to what we just read, it would have been Akkadians carrying these E markers into Mesopotamia. According to Godfrey C., who is a historian and writer, he says, the spread of Semitic peoples. This map explains so much about the evolution of Semitic peoples. Its child E-M123 began a migration up the Red Sea and thereby became a main haplogroup of Semitic peoples, but it would be many thousands of years before Semitic languages originated. To interpret the map, the largest hotspot marks the area where E-M123 likely originated and originally diversified around the strait between Djibouti and Yemen. That cluster of diversity was reinforced about 4,000 years ago when Semites from the Levant backtracked down the Red Sea and colonized the strategic area around the strait, resulting in the spread of Semitic language into Ethiopia. The original migration up the Red Sea resulted in the Natufian culture of the Levant starting around 15,000 years ago. More than 90% of Natufians carried haplogroup E, much of that E-M123. Natufian descendants account for the hotspot around Israel. In the Neolithic period, some Natufian descendants migrated to the Caucasus region to join the Khor-Araxes culture, accounting for the hotspot in Azerbaijan. A branch of Khor-Araxes then expanded down into Mesopotamia, accounting for the hotspot on the map. The Akkadians also carried E-M123 in their invasion of Mesopotamia. Lastly, the exile of Judahites to Babylon brought a third batch of E-M123 to Mesopotamia. And according to Peter Solomon Kovacs, a historian and archaeologist, he says, E-M34 originated in Northeast Africa, where the Proto-Semitic language also originated. This lineage also belongs to the founding Semitic lineage. Today, E-M34, it is especially linked to people from the Levant region or a Semitic connection to the Levant, where Proto-Semitic became the Semitic language and people. Israel, Jordan, Cyprus, Semitic Ethiopian Amhara, and Kurds. The founding Semitic lineage was in Y-DNA haplogroup E. I support the view that the Natufians were the first Proto-Semitic migrants to bring a version of the Proto-Semitic language out of Northeast Africa, where the Proto-Semitic language originated. Other Semitic migrants from Northeast Africa continued this process until the Semitic language formed in the Bronze Age. The Natufians were tested for ancient DNA and found exclusively in haplogroup E, E-P2, E-M215, E-Z830. Thus, the primary founding lineage of the Semitic people based on the Natufian data and present-day Semitic populations, Y-DNA, E-P2, E-M215, E-M35 to E-M78, West Semitic, and E-M35 to E-Z830 to E-M34, East Semitic. The Hebrews would have brought their own form of a Semitic language and unique paternal lineages into the Levant at the end of the Late Bronze Age, according to the Bible. And according to the Hebrew Bible that records their genealogies, their paternal lineages were also new to the Levant from the Late Bronze Age forward. Thus, my view that the founding Hebrew paternal lineage of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to King David was also in Y-DNA haplogroup E in the Northwest Semitic branch of E-M35 to E-M78. From what we just read, various historians and geneticists are essentially saying that Semites expanded from the Levant, and when they spread from the Levant, these Semites would have carried haplogroup E. And of course, this fits well with the latest studies dealing with the origins of Semitic languages and people, that they come from the Levant, and that early Semitic migrants like the Akkadians would have traveled from the Levant into Mesopotamia. And of course, there are genetic papers and articles that illustrate that these early Semites would have carried haplogroup E into Mesopotamia. And all of this makes sense if Semites descend from Natufians and Natufians carried haplogroup E. According to the paper, Bayesian phylogenetic analysis of Semitic languages identifies an early Bronze Age origin of Semitic in the Near East. It reads, "We estimate that Semitic had an early Bronze Age origin approximately 5,750 years before present in the Levant, followed by an expansion of Akkadian into Mesopotamia." And according to the paper titled How Eurasia Was Born, it reads, "The most plausible candidates for Semitic remigration to the Fertile Crescent, with TMRCAs, the most common recent ancestors, fitting the arrival of the Akkadians and other early Semitic peoples, are certain subclades of both E-V22 and E-V12, with relatively early TMRCAs present in the Middle East could be candidates for such remigration, such as E-FGC 14382, TMRCA is 2200 BCE, and E-V3262, TMRCA is 2600 BCE. And according to the article titled Haplogroup J is definitely not Semitic in origin, it reads, "According to the theory, Afro-Asiatic languages spread to Asia via E1b haplogroup, not J1. It is historically known that a ruling elite class of Afro-Asiatic people, Akkadians, Assyrians, etc., also invaded the north of Mesopotamia and brought their Afro-Asiatic languages to the central and northern parts of Mesopotamia during the period of Akkadians and Babylonians. Elite dominance model of E1b1 might be supposed for Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians. In this sense, it might be theorized that Sumerian was the main language of the ancient Mesopotamians before Afro-Asiatic E1b overwhelmed Mesopotamia, elite dominance model. With all that being said, the evidence seems to point to haplogroup E being the founding lineage of Semitic people, and that Semites expanded from the Levant. The Levant is their homeland, and they left going into Mesopotamia and Arabia, carrying the E marker. And you can quite literally see this migration take place if you look at the ages of the samples. The oldest haplogroup E samples in the Middle East are from the Natufians. But as you expand outwards from the Levant into Mesopotamia, the samples we find of E get younger and younger, from the Natufians to the pre-pottery Neolithic B to the early Bronze Age and the late Bronze Age / early Iron Age. According to the genetic analysis done on 6 Natufian remains from northern Israel, the Natufians carried the Y-DNA haplogroup E-Z830, a somewhat upland clade of E-M123, and therefore ancestral to it. The Natufians were one of the first settled peoples in the world. and may have contributed to the domestication of certain crops and thus the advent of agriculture. The discovery of E-Z830 without other clades suggests an indigenous presence in Canaan and Israel and predates all other clades, which are not known to have existed in the region at the time, 10,000 years before present. Haplogroup E1b1b2 has been found in 75% of the Angazelle population, along with 60% of PP and B populations circa 8,800 through 6,500 BC. A study on population genomics of Anatolia, the Caucasus, and the Levant found in Arslan Tepe one individual who lived circa 3369 through 3110 BC who belonged to E-M84. A study on the population genomics of Bronze Age Eurasia found the remains in Narkim, Getshan, and Armenia lived during the Middle Bronze Age to E-M84. A study on population genomics of Anatolia and the Caucasus and the Levant found in the ancient city of Ebla during the Bronze Age one male individual who carried E-M84. A study on South Asian history, Narstingham et al. 2019 found several individuals who belonged to E-Y31991 in late Bronze Age/early Iron Age samples in the Swat Valley, modern northern Pakistan. So as you can see, the E samples get younger and younger as one leaves the Levant going into Mesopotamia, from the Natufians all the way to the early Bronze Age when Semites expanded from the Levant.